Morning YouTube. So I'm going to make a quick video about the objectification of men. This is partly in response to the series of discussions that's going on, largely started by Laura Layla in her video A Question for Women. So I'm going to title this one A Question for Men. And that discussion's around the sexual objectification of women and their apparently willing participation in at least some of that sexual objectification. What I want to suggest in this video is that there's a complement of that within men, which Silversoul some time ago referred to as success objectification, men as success objects. And I've done a little bit of reading around about that, and there is a term that's used, so I'm going to use that term. And what I'm going to suggest is that men are objectified in terms of their ability to succeed and to demonstrate drive and ambition and succeed as instrumental agents in the world, and participate actively in that objectification, and then put some little bits around the sides of that. Let's just see where I can go with that. Alright, okay. In terms of media representation, one of the key agendas within the sexual objectification of women discussion is about the representation of how women are represented in the media, in films, in TV shows, and magazine advertisements, that kind of thing particularly. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there is a kind of opposite of that in terms of male representation. Men are usually represented as successful go-getters, and stable, balanced individuals with drive and a vision of the future and the ability to move towards that future in a way which, as I say, has them acting as instrumental agents in the world. We tend not to get images of men as nurturers or caregivers or non-instrumental agents of some kind, as the objects of action rather than the subjects of action. And even when we do get them as portrayed as nurturers and caregivers, it's usually in a very particular way. And here I'm thinking of that Will Smith film, The Pursuit of Happiness, which was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, something like that. He was a single parent looking after his kid in New York, kicked out of a job, he was on the streets, that kind of thing. And he was a fantastic parent. He did everything for his son to keep his son alive and fed. But in order to do that, the things he was kind of doing for that were very driven and classically male. There's one scene in it where he's trying to get his kid himself and his kid into a night shelter because they're homeless and they've been sleeping in bathroom stalls. Tries to get his kid into a night shelter, and the way he does that, of course, is to push to the front of the queue in front of the 100 or so other homeless vagrants who are also trying to get access to the same night shelter. And by the end of the film, of course, through his own grit and determination, he manages to become a successful lawyer. Again, beating out 40 or 50 other people who are also competing for that one job. So even though he's presented as a nurturer and caregiver in that film, it's the driving force is also the successful male. So again, it's the man as success object as portrayed in media and how the media represents that. There's quite a lot of evidence to suggest that through whatever purpose or whatever process, successful men, in the sense that I'm talking about here, ambitious men with drive who achieve some form of material success in the world, are more attractive to women. These statistics seem to bear that out. Men who demonstrate those qualities are more likely to be in sustained relationships and or are more likely to have multiple sexual partners or multiple love interest partners. They're more likely to be players. Unsuccessful men in material terms are more likely to be lonely and alone. Some of the accounts for this come from evolution, of course. There's an evolutionary psych reading of male success as being a contributor towards these things in the same ways, or complementing the evolutionary account of female success being largely dependent upon their ability to comply with sexual objectification. The evolutionary account for success objectification of men, I won't bore you with the details of that, but it draws on the same logic that sexual desire in women is steered towards success objects in the way that sexual desire in men is steered towards sex objects. The evolution of desire, as it's sometimes called, and there's a book by that name which lays out the argument. I'll put a link in the description box for some good blog postings about that book and about the arguments. So there is a kind of naturalistic account for this, for why men would be success objects. But of course, it would be the naturalistic fallacy if we said that we had to do that because, we're not in Kansas anymore. We don't have to do what evolution tells us. So the question there is, why do we do that? Well, we might do it because we like it. Women might like dressing up as sex objects, and it's perfectly within their gift to enjoy that process. Men might like being successful, and again, it's within our gift, I would assume, to do that. I'm not arguing against individual liberty. And also for the fact that being materially successful, having drive and ambition, does bring us other rewards as well as life partners or sex partners. It does accumulate stuff around you. You do get the pool and the Maserati if you're successful, as well as Angelina Jolie. However, the downside of this, certainly in terms of success objectification as a contributor towards the formation of relationships, is that many men don't like thinking about that. I imagine there's again a correlate in amongst women. You can perhaps let me know that if you think this. Just as I imagine women would not like it if they thought that men only want them for their bodies. I'm assuming that many women would not like to think that. Most men would not like to think that women only like them for their success story, for their contact list, for their bank account, for their Maserati and swimming pool. I don't like to think that about myself, and I don't like to think that about other women. I don't like to participate in that exchange. So there are reasons why, even though it's a successful, even though thinking of one's success and trying to aim for and trying to be driven in those ways, even though it accumulates stuff around you, it brings a downside in the sense that we don't really like thinking about it. It doesn't portray us in either ourselves as men or women in a particularly good light, I don't think. Okay. Yeah, just one or two things I need to just drop in at this point. One is that I'm not drawing exact parallels, of course, between men as success objects and women as sex objects. My personal view is that men have it easier and have it better. We own most of the stuff. But in a sense, I don't really want to go there, because my discussion isn't really about who's got it better and who's got it worse. It's really about the roles that we adopt. Why do we as men adopt that role? Not, is it a good role? Does it bring us stuff or not? It's really about why do we contribute towards our own objectification, even one as apparently successful as success objectification. Why do we play the game, in other words? I just want to leave with two little notes on that, because it is really, I would like some responses, ideally from men, but if there's any women out there who would like to contribute, then I will tolerate your contributions. But just to close with just two little bits of things. One reason I think why men might want to continue playing the game and continue trying to be successful might be because the prospects of not doing, or the consequences of not doing, are too terrifying. In the way that women might want to continue being sex objects, because if you don't, you end up looking like Andrea Dworkin. It might be the case that men don't want to reject the success game, because if we do, we might end up looking like Bill and Dwayne from True Forced Loneliness, and that's not a prospect many of us find attractive. I would rather try to be Bill Gates than Dwayne. But the other reason, the other little bit I want to just tack on the end here is maybe there's an argument to be made that many of us as men are not playing the game. I'd just refer you to a TED talk by Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist, recently. He's talking about why guys aren't succeeding, why men are not succeeding, and he cites those statistics that are around right now about how many young men are failing at college and failing at university and failing right the way through the educational system, doing far less well than women, and subsequently doing less well in society perhaps, and are spending much more time alone, are spending much more time on video games and on the internet, are not forming permanent relationships, are forming relationships with internet porn and boxes of Kleenex rather than real life women and girls, which of course is a kind of a horror story, and it's a chastening tale, but maybe that's what it looks like when you don't play the success game. Maybe that's what it looks like when a generation of men either decides to step off that particular rat race or feels they're unable to play the game, and so enters a kind of dysfunctional state as a result. Anyhow, that's a longer video than I intended, so if you do have any thoughts about that, I'll just reiterate the question and appreciate any kinds of responses. In the same way that women are sexually objectified, there is a case to be made that men are success objectified, made to feel that we need to succeed in the world and be intentional agents, players. Why do we do it, and why do we contribute towards our own objectification? Thanks very much, YouTube.